Have you ever seen a stray dog and felt an immediate, overwhelming pull to help it? What does it say about a person who cannot drive past a lost, frightened animal? Is it impulsive, or is something far deeper and more psychological happening inside that person? What if the people who rescue strays without hesitation are responding to something profoundly human? What if that instant decision to stop, to help, to act, reveals who someone truly is? And what if rescuing a stray dog is one of the most psychologically meaningful things a person can do? There is a moment that people who rescue stray dogs all seem to know. The moment they see the animal, thin, frightened, alone, and without thinking they stop. Not everyone stops. Most keep driving. Most tell themselves it is not their problem, that someone else will handle it, that they lack the time or resources to act. But some people cannot keep driving. Something in them will not allow it. The question is not what they did, but who they are that they did it without any hesitation. Psychologists who study prosocial behavior, empathy, and altruism have spent decades trying to understand what separates people who act from those who look away. What they found is fascinating. Rescuing a stray dog without hesitation is not random. It reflects a specific constellation of psychological traits, emotional experiences, and deeply held values quietly forming for years. Examining the psychology of the person who stops reveals something remarkable, not just about them, but about the full human capacity for compassion and action. What is happening in the moment a person sees a stray dog and immediately decides to help? What psychological forces activate in that split second before any conscious decision is made? Because it does not feel like a decision to most of them. It feels like a reflex, something that bypasses the calculating mind and speaks directly from somewhere deeper and older. Is it empathy? Is it a personal history with animals? Is it a childhood wound that recognizes itself in the frightened eyes of a creature alone in the world with nowhere to turn? Or is it something elemental, a direct biological response to vulnerability? A nervous system wired, for whatever reason, to respond to suffering with action rather than with avoidance? And what does it mean that some people feel the pull powerfully, while others feel almost nothing? Is it a difference in empathy, attachment style, life experience, or the architecture of the brain? These questions matter. The psychology of the rescuer is a window into what human compassion looks like when it has not yet been reasoned or rationalized away. Because when we examine the psychology carefully, what looks like impulsiveness turns out to be something different, a deeply rooted, emotionally intelligent response to a specific and visible kind of need. Let us start with empathy, the capacity to recognize and share the emotional state of another. Empathy exists on a spectrum, and people vary enormously in its intensity and scope. Most people extend empathy most readily to those who resemble them. But some have what researchers call broad or cross-species empathy, extending easily and naturally beyond their own kind. People with broad empathy do not require similarity to feel connection. They can look into a stray's eyes and experience something close to what they would feel seeing a frightened child. This capacity is not emotional softness. Research suggests people with high cross-species empathy score higher on emotional intelligence, perspective-taking, and moral reasoning across many contexts. The person who stops for the stray is not simply sentimental. They likely have a sophisticated emotional and moral architecture, one that refuses to draw arbitrary lines around who deserves care. There is also altruism, action taken to benefit another at personal cost. Rescuing a stray is almost always costly. It takes time, money, energy, and real emotional investment. Classical psychology once argued that true altruism does not exist, that all helping is ultimately self-serving. But modern research has significantly complicated and challenged this view. Many people who consistently engage in helping behavior show activation in the brain's reward centers, suggesting the helping itself is intrinsically rather than externally motivating. For these people, helping is the reward. Responding to suffering with action feels genuinely necessary, not optional, not heroic, not virtuous. Simply required. They rescue the stray because the alternative, driving past, doing nothing, would create an internal distress that is genuinely unbearable. Their nervous system will not accept inaction in the face of visible suffering. Now let us talk about moral identity, the degree to which being a caring person is central to how someone understands themselves. People with strong moral identities feel compelled to act consistently with who they believe they are. For someone whose identity is rooted in care, not stopping for a suffering animal would feel like a betrayal of self, not a missed opportunity, but a fundamental failure of character. This is why rescuers often say, "I just couldn't leave it there." That phrasing is psychologically precise. They are not describing a choice. They are describing the absence of one. There is also the identifiable victim effect. We are more moved to help when suffering has a face, when it is specific, visible, and immediate rather than abstract and distant. A stray on the roadside is the identifiable victim effect in its most acute form. The suffering is right there, undeniable, looking at you. For some people, that proximity makes action inevitable. Research shows that people with high empathic concern are more likely to engage in spontaneous, helping behavior when confronted directly with visible suffering of any kind. Empathy alone does not always produce action. What matters is empathy combined with self-efficacy. The belief that what you do can make a difference to this particular creature, right now. The rescuer has both. They feel the suffering acutely and believe, without deliberation, that they can respond effectively. That combination produces immediate, unhesitating action. There is also the absence of bystander effect. The stray cannot advocate for itself. No one is clearly responsible. And for a certain type of person, that gap activates immediate personal responsibility. They do not wait for permission or look for someone else to act. They simply step into the space the animal's need has opened, and they fill it completely. When we understand the moral identity, the empathic concern, the self-efficacy, and the collapse of bystander effect, the behavior stops being mysterious. It starts being inevitable for people wired this way. Now let us look at what is happening in the brain in the moment of rescue. It is not only a psychological event, it is neurological, fast, automatic, and deeply wired into the human system. When a person sees a frightened creature, the brain's mirror neurons activate, firing in response to another's experience as though we are having that experience ourselves. For high-empathy individuals, this activation is more intense. The stray's distress is not processed as an abstract external event. It is felt viscerally, as something personally experienced. Simultaneously, the amygdala responds to the animal's fear signals. Dogs display fear through posture, ear position, tail carriage, and eye expression. High-empathy humans read these signals automatically. The result is a rapid cascade. Mirror neurons fire, the amygdala activates, oxytocin rises, the motivation system orients toward relief, all before conscious deliberation begins. Oxytocin is particularly important. It is released in response to perceived vulnerability and need, a neurological signal that says, "This being requires care, and you are capable of providing it." For people with high oxytocin sensitivity, this signal is powerful and hard to override. It creates an almost physical pull toward the vulnerable animal, a draw that practicality must work to suppress. For the person who rescues without hesitation, that suppression never occurs. The neurological pull is stronger than the rationalizing voice that says you are busy. This is not your problem. There is also the role of cortisol. When we witness suffering and do nothing, cortisol rises. The inaction itself becomes physiologically distressing. For high-empathy people, this cortisol response is more pronounced. Driving past a suffering animal does not feel neutral. It feels actively bad, physically uncomfortable, emotionally destabilizing, like a violation of something essential in their nervous system. Evolutionary psychology offers a complementary explanation. Human beings evolved as cooperative social animals with strong instincts to protect the vulnerable, particularly the young, the sick, and those who cannot help themselves. Dogs, especially puppies and frightened strays, trigger these protective instincts with particular force. Their large eyes, soft features, and fear displays activate the same neural circuits as infant vulnerability. This is an evolved response, one that served survival across the long arc of human history, when protecting the vulnerable also meant protecting the group, maintaining cooperation, and sustaining the social fabric. When a person stops for a stray dog without thinking, part of what is happening is millions of years of evolved social instinct activating, doing exactly what it was always designed to do. The rescuer is, in a specific sense, functioning exactly as human beings were designed to, responding to vulnerability with protection rather than with calculated indifference. When you put the neuroscience, evolutionary biology, and mirror neuron research together, a clear picture emerges. The rescuer is acting from their deepest and most rational nature. Now let us talk about what these people are often carrying beneath the impulse. The psychology of the rescuer is rarely just about the dog. It is almost always also about something in themselves. Many rescuers have a personal history with animals that runs deep. A childhood dog who offered unconditional comfort, an early bond that felt safer than the people around them. For these people, the stray is also a reactivation of something personal. A connection to a time when an animal's love was the most reliable, uncomplicated thing in their world. There is also the psychology of recognition. Many rescuers describe seeing themselves in the animal. The aloneness, the fear, the vulnerability, the desperate need for someone to simply stop and choose them. This recognition is not projection. It is the psyche seeing its own wound in another's experience, and responding to that wound with the care it once needed, but perhaps never received. For people who experience childhood loneliness or abandonment, a frightened, unclaimed animal activates deep memory. Not consciously necessarily, but in the body, in the urgency of the response. When they stop for the stray, they are not only helping the dog. They are also healing something in themselves, meeting a need that was once unmet with exactly the response they needed. This is not to say the rescue is motivated by selfishness. The care they provide is real and complete. But healing and genuine altruism are not mutually exclusive. They can coexist beautifully. There is also the dimension of power. Many rescuers have experienced situations where they were powerless, where suffering was happening and there was nothing they could do to stop it. With the stray, they have power. They can act. They can change the outcome. The suffering that once felt untouchable is within their reach, and their nervous system responds with fierce intention. There is something profound about the bond that forms. A rescued dog does not know your failures or complications. It knows only that you stopped, that you chose it when you did not have to. That stopping becomes the entire foundation of a bond that is, for many rescuers, among the most uncomplicated and genuinely loving relationships they have ever known in their lives. A rescued dog sees you without history or judgment, without the weight of complicated things you carry. It sees only the person who stopped. And that is enough. In a world where being fully seen comes at great cost, that kind of simple recognition is not small. It is something the rescuer needed too, and the dog gives it freely. The human-dog rescue bond is, at its best, a mutual reclamation. The dog is rescued from the street, and the human, in ways they may not fully articulate, is rescued from something too. The rescue bond is unlike most relationships. It begins in the most elemental way, one creature in need, one with the capacity to help, and grows from simplicity into something extraordinary. Now let us consider the types of people who rescue strays without hesitation. The behavior is common, but the root of the impulse varies in ways worth exploring carefully. There is the natural protector, always the caregiver, the fixer, the one who steps in when something is wrong. Rescuing the stray is not a decision for them. It is an expression of who they are. Then there is the wounded healer, someone who has known their own version of being lost, frightened, and unclaimed. They stop because something in the animal's eyes speaks directly to their own experience. The wounded healer brings their history of fear and aloneness to the rescue. They understand in their body what the animal is experiencing, and that understanding becomes its own powerful form of care. There is the justice seeker, someone whose sense of fairness runs wide and deep. They cannot tolerate something vulnerable being ignored when the world has the capacity to help. The stray is an injustice to correct. There is the empath in action, someone whose empathy is not merely felt but consistently expressed through behavior. The feeling, for them, is always a call to act. It does not allow for standing still. The empath in action may be overwhelmed by how many animals need help, but that overwhelm never cancels the impulse. It simply means they act on the one that is right in front of them, right now. There is the quietly grieving, someone who has lost a beloved animal or person, and who rescues strays partly from love and partly from a need to give this one what they could not give the one they lost. Tightened. The quietly grieving rescues because love left them with more to give than they had somewhere to put it. The stray becomes, in the most beautiful and generous way, a place for all that remaining love to go. Which type feels most like you? You might find yourself in more than one. You might find that who you are in the moment of rescue has changed as your own story has changed over time. For many rescuers, the impulse to act without hesitation connects to something older than their adult identity, something formed in the earliest years of their emotional life. Think about the child drawn to every hurt animal, who brought home injured birds and frightened cats, who could not walk past suffering without feeling its weight settle entirely in their chest. That child was practicing something profound. They were learning that their capacity for care was real, that their action could matter, that the world's pain was something they were allowed to respond to directly. For some, that child was also looking for something. In the injured bird, in the stray cat, a relationship uncomplicated by family dynamics. One where their love was clearly needed and clearly received. When the adult stops for the stray dog without hesitation, that child is right there with them. The impulse did not grow up and become rational. It simply grew up and became more capable. There is also the matter of worthiness. Some rescuers grew up where love had to be earned, where being cared for required performing or achieving or suppressing what they genuinely needed. In rescuing the stray, they give care freely, without requiring the animal to earn it first. In doing so, they affirm something they may still be learning, that care does not need to be earned. That affirmation is not only for the dog. It is for the part of themselves once told that unearned care was not something they were allowed to receive or to give. Some trauma-informed therapists have noted that animal rescue often functions as active healing for people with histories of powerlessness, loss, or early neglect, a way to rewrite old endings with new choices. There is something in choosing a frightened stranger, of seeing the unclaimed, the forgotten, the overlooked, that restores something in the rescuer as much as it restores the animal. In a culture that increasingly rewards detachment and self-interest, the person who stops for the stray is a quiet act of resistance, an insistence that compassion still has a place in how we move. They insist that vulnerability is not inconvenient, that suffering is not someone else's problem, that compassion, even toward a stranger, even at personal cost, is worth honoring with action. There is something the world needs from people who rescue strays, not just the dogs they save, but the reminder that compassion without calculation is still possible, still present, still profoundly human. If you cannot drive past a frightened stray, you are not impulsive or naive. You are someone whose empathy has remained intact, whose values show up not only in what you believe but in what you do. You carry a rare courage, the courage to let suffering matter, to let it stop you, to change the course of your day for the sake of a life that has no other advocate. If this video touched something real in your experience, please like it and subscribe. And in the comments, tell us about the stray you rescued. Tell us what happened next. Those stories deserve to be shared.